Your microphones. Public commenters, please step up to a microphone. Please direct your comments through the chair and keep your comments on point and concise. Roll call today. We have Liz, Joya, Stephen Gold, Ron Hawkins, Bob Perkins, Richard Stetson, Elliot Thompson.
Susan Dorr came through the door.
And Susan Dorr has
Forgive
slipped
my
in.
tardiness.
Okay, thank you, Susan. Meeting minutes assignment for this month will be me, alphabetically. We've had a request to change the agenda a little bit and have public comments on non-agenda items next. Do we have any public comments today? Thank you. None. Then, meeting minutes approval. We don't have meeting minutes available today for, go ahead. For the August meeting, but I think we'll have those for the next meeting. So we'll have 2 minutes to approve next meeting. Somebody make sure I don't miss items on the agenda. Thank you. Next meeting date, October 14. Janice, does that sound okay?
What's the date again?
October 14.
That should be all right, yes.
Okay. All right. We'll see you all here next October 14. Next on the agenda, select board status of Harbor Committee appointments and reappointments.
I got here just in time. So we're taking the appointments in sort of in chunks because we didn't want to have to do it all in one meeting because it just gets a little exhausting. So I'm expecting that this committee will be at our next September meeting, not this evening. That will take it up.
Okay, you have a meeting tonight,
We do,
so the 23rd.
correct.
Okay, great. We look forward to that. 9:23. Thank you, Susan. Harbor Master report.
Holy smokes.
Tell us what's going on in Camden Harbor.
Well,
Can you grab a microphone since we're broadcasting?
I would say the most, as far as moorings go, we are, this time of year we go through and we have a kind of a running list of how many moorings never had a boat on them. And hopefully the mooring holder informed us that they weren't going to do that by a waiver. Or at least like this one guy who there wasn't a boat on, he's from New Jersey, but he's diligent and he usually calls up and says things like, I'm for whatever reason, I'm going to get a boat in late because I can do some September sailing. I'm going to have the boat on for 40 days or real close. He knows the ordinance. But he just called me yesterday. It was like, I know I said I was going to have it on, but I'm not. Something happened with my daughter's property and I've got to do this. And so it's rare when that happens. And I usually don't say, well, the ordinance says I can take your mooring away. If they're trying to communicate, I don't. Just kind of give you an update. Then there's one mooring that we offered to somebody after it was given up by a person. They signed the release form early, June. Went through the list, found somebody. Usually you go through 2 or 3 people that don't want it. So this person said they wanted it, said yes, and then never contacted the person, never paid us. Now we can't get a hold of them. I've left 2 messages for him. So I called the person who obviously owns the mooring gear because they're like, how come no one's paid me for my mooring gear that's sitting there? So that's in the process of trying to figure out what to do about that. I'm going to give the guy 2 weeks because there's nothing in the ordinance that says if this happens. It doesn't talk about this, but it does say if John Q. Public is on the waiting list, you call, leave a message, or you talk to them and say, or her and say, I'm going to offer you a mooring. They have 2 weeks to say yes or no. And if they don't, you can say, I'm going to leave you where you're on the list and go to the next person. So I'm giving that person 2 weeks. And then, I don't know, just going to go to the next person on the list. So that's exciting, isn't it? That's a 28-footer.
I have a question. If in a case where somebody is offered a mooring and they decline, do they come off the list?
No, they stay where they are on the list. A great example of that is there's someone that's been on since 1983. They're just top of the list. And I think my 10th year, I remember Dave Miramont. I said, Dave, is it okay if I just not call you? Because I usually have to call him and just, hey, Dave, oh, no. So, yeah, I don't call Dave. There's folks that I just say, you call me when you want one, preferably in the spring, so I can then have moorings ready for you.
So are you saying there were only 2 moorings this year that were unused?
No, I'm not going to bring up all this year. I would think more than ever, there were moorings that didn't make the 40-day requirement. I mean, ever since COVID, that's been more than that. And, again, that's something we can discuss as a committee. But if I went to the letter of the law, we would take away a lot of moorings. There'd be more moorings than already. I'm going through the list for certain boats, especially if they're in not good areas. Nobody wants them. I tell folks it's it. I heard it's a 10-year waiting list. I mean, no, not if it's a small boat or you don't really care where you are. Up to 30 footers, you get on the list, you'll probably have a mooring next year. It's going to be far away,
Right.
but you'll get one.
Steve, my question is, you said a lot of people didn't make the 40-day thing, but I'm curious about how many moorings were empty totally all season?
Well, again, we don't have drones, camera shots every 24 hours, take a pic and to know. We're going out and using our own data. So if I call up someone and said, you never had a boat, and they're like, well, yeah, I did. We can't say, you know what I'm saying? We don't check every mooring every day. So we know, what we basically do is we make a list of you go by mooring and it's got a pennant there that's just full of green. It hasn't been picked up the whole season. So.
Do you know the number of permitted moorings this year?
I don't know the exact number, but I can get that for you.
I asked Jimmy if she could provide that. She hasn't responded yet. Well, can you venture a guess in the number of permitted moorings?
It'd be somewhere just above 400.
That includes Lemon moorings.
Oh yeah, and Camden Yacht Club. The service moorings.
Total spots.
Yeah. We got a nice bike rack, and we've got the display where we have the aquarium right next to my office. There's a bike rack there, and there was a bike that's been in the rack since June. Big fat tire bike, a nice bike. No one touched it so about a week ago, I snapped the lock and I brought it to the police department and said, because it's kind of in the way. You have to walk around all the time. And I said, I don't know whose this is. They're trying to find out whose it is. I don't know. It was probably a $2,000 bike.
Black one?
Black one, yeah. You know which one? Yeah, Jim.
Yeah, big thing was sticking out.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, wow. Okay. No other events or incidents to report worth noting? Enforcement actions?
Yeah, not that I can recall that's that exciting.
Things are calm in the harbor. That's good. Well, go ahead, Bob.
You talked about back in early July, there was a slow start. Did it get up to entirely normal? And when would you say that happened?
Yeah, I would say it got up to totally normal right around August. I don't know, August 10th.
Long time.
Yeah, it took a long time. And then for 2.5 weeks, it was at it was as busy as it used to be 15 years ago, 10 years ago. You get that from July 10th all the way to like a week ago, you know. So it's just, it gets up there and even more, it seems, but it's a much shorter duration where it's really crazy. Where Janet's like, I've got 5 boats that are on a waiting list to come in for 2 hours. I got this, and we're really pushing the maximum of what we can do. We're trying to, a lot of folks will want to come in from the outer chain for 2 hours or whatever, or lunch, and we'll be putting them on, we'll call folks that for if Richard's Inner Harbor float is available, we'll say, are you going to use it? No. We'll put someone on there for 2 hours and then ferry him in, or tell him to take the taxi in and stuff like that. But then it's not crickets, but it's, you guys go down there now and there's space at the dock. Locals that have moorings will come in and say, can I come in and clean my boat for 2-3 hours? I'm like, yeah, go ahead. There's someone here,
So we're going to be significantly down on dockage revenue.
Well, I wouldn't say significantly, but I think we will see a downtick for dockage.
Elliot, can I just ask Mr. Pixley? Thank you. Peter Lindquist, I live in Camden. So the next meeting is October, what did it say, 14th here?
Yes.
So Stephen, could I just because this is so helpful, could I ask you to bring to the next meeting data about many of the things that people are asking about, numbers of moorings, instead of anecdotally telling us about what happened in the last 2 weeks or 3 weeks ago or whatever, but just revenue, all the things that are in your domain, just put them on 2 sheets of paper so that as the select board and as citizens think about this stuff, they don't know the history of some of these relationships that you have. That's okay. But we certainly can say to somebody, a citizen who has a mooring or has a dinghy, no, that's a matter, you're wrong. Here's the numbers. So could you do that by next meeting? Just bring data in a form that's called this.
Yeah,
Okay.
we could compile
All right,
that.
thank you. That'd be really helpful to me.
We've just heard from Peter Lindquist, and he's asking the harbor master to deliver data. How's the committee feel about that?
What's the subject? Is it more in the dockage fees that we were the last thing Steve or something else?
I think, from what I've heard what I think I heard Peter say was that you want the exact number of permitted moorings. You want, and again, wouldn't be able to tell, the data I have is like, as best as I could do is, here's how many moorings that people signed release forms saying, I'm not using my mooring. We have that data specifically. I don't know if you want me to give data like what I was telling informing the committee earlier. We'll go and look and say, well, here's how many moorings looks like they haven't been used. We could put that in. We can't say for sure, because again, we don't have a flyby every day saying, oh, for sure there wasn't a boat ever put on that. So, but we can get data like that, enough to help.
But also revenue.
Peter, I'd like to suggest that you submit itemization of information you're looking for.
Sure. Okay.
May I? There is sort of an order of operations for how that information is gathered and disseminated. So to have a member of the public directing a department head in that way is not quite the order of operations. But I think that as the season winds down, we could have a bigger discussion about how that information is getting out, because I know that it was earlier in the year when we talked about when Steve did that assessment of revenue in money in and money out. And I know that there is an interest on the part of the public and of this committee, and I think it's valuable. But the process let's adhere to the process. And because we're at a really interesting juncture where we're looking at data collection and how we're going to be, making use of the information that we collected around the dinghies and so on. So I think it can be part of a bigger discussion about how we get that into a form that's available for the public. I do think it's valuable, but let's follow the procedure.
And Susan, in this example, how would you define that procedure?
I want you to share your microphone with her because I like microphones, Mr. Chairperson. I feel more comfortable when I'm around a microphone.
Well, because even I, as a select board member, am not in the position to direct a department head to do things. We have an order of operations that goes through the town manager.
And it's
so-
great. It's good, a good idea. And I think I respect the request, and I'll start working out with Jimmy. The interesting thing is that we're right between the two softwares, the antiquated software we've been using for years, and we just went live a couple of days ago with this new software. And that's going to be much easier to be able to get the data, how many moorings, what the generation is of money for moorings under 25, moorings between 25 and 30. We can definitely get all that.
And is that going to be live on the website or is that internal?
Well, I think it'll be live for who we make it live for. I don't think we're going to want that totally public, but maybe we do. I don't know. Again, it's brand new. We just went online 3 days ago with the new software. But I think that's great. I think the more information we have, the better. Like this information is great to see it right in front of us that you guys collected. It's definitely a good tool. So then you can kind of really look at it and say, okay, that makes sense maybe to put another rack over here or to do this. So yeah, information's good.
Steve, just to go backwards for a minute, just because so many years it's been a problem, but I gather since you didn't mention anything, that the whole day sailor schedule and interactions worked really well this year?
Yeah, yes. The day sailors, the past 5-6 years, I would have meetings every 2 or 3 in the beginning of the season, and just literally have coffee and donuts and stuff, and they work very well together.
Well, my observation this year was bam, bam, bam. They were going in and out like clockwork, and nobody was yelling or anything.
Yeah, I think 15 years ago, we had it set up in a good way, but there wasn't any internal lubrication. There wasn't any, egos were getting in the way. That's settled down, and now it's really working well. They help each other work out, and they communicate really well.
Great.
I think, first of all, we're kind of almost at the end of the real sort of revenue seasons, shall we say. I mean, people aren't coming in as much. So getting the end of the year compared to the end of the year will be relevant, but also if we have the ability with the software to track month by month compared to prior years, so that you can see, well, is there a pattern where we're getting jammed for 2 or 3 weeks in August? That is a problem, but to not necessarily make whatever our solutions are. The same thing we do for August doesn't necessarily have to be what we do for May when it's not busy. And if it turns out that, well, I just don't know. It just seems like this year there was a dearth of boats out on the bay just to observe, and what you're reporting here, and then it got incredibly busy. And I think that may be a pattern going forward. And so if we can have actual data of usage that month by month, that might help us telescope or actually direct solutions to the time that's a problem.
Yeah.
Okay. Susan, thank you for clarifying procedure process for us. And Peter, committee would appreciate getting your input on items of interest. Okay, yes.
Forget it.
Yes.
Not quite having to, what you said, Steve, about people assuming there's a really long wait list for moorings, and maybe that's not the case. I think maybe in the spring, maybe we have a harbor committee newsletter or a piece in the town newsletter that comes out, because I'm not sure, maybe people don't know that. I mean, I'm sure if you get a boat, you go ask. I mean, you should be able to go ask and know that. But
No, that's a good idea.
It might be, somebody might have a boat sitting in their back 40 that they're like, that, I don't know, if we're looking to use those moorings, somebody might be
yeah.
motivated to not have something in the dinghy dock, and maybe they,
Conventional wisdom, you can't get a mooring.
right, and we talked about all those harbor access and
Yeah.
the kayak racks, instead of using that, just kind of have a little newsletter
The
of
direction.
all the things that
Yeah.
we're saying I wish people did.
Well, it's also on that note, if you had like 3 do's and 3 don'ts,
Right.
like, you don't, if like you're allowed to let someone rent your mooring if you're not going to use it for a piece of time, but you do need to notify the town. So when go through us, it's got to be someone on the waiting list, and there's a way to do it. But so sometimes folks are like, oh, don't tell the harbor master we're not using the mooring this year. And that's wrong attitude,
Yeah,
I mean,
do's and don'ts. Go register your dinghy. If you have a
yeah.
motor on your vessel,
Put
then
your
put
engine down.
Yeah,
your registration.
exactly.
All of these things that
No, that'd be a
people
great
might
thing
not
to
think
do.
about that are.
And we can actually disseminate that via the list that we have for all our mooring holders and people on the waiting list.
I mean, rather than going town ordinances, all that, personally, I'd like a one page, easy to read.
Yeah.
Blocks, colors,
Mhm.
bold, that
Mhm.
kind of thing.
Steve, while in the process of when you're gathering data, I'd be interested to know in terms of mooring holders and maybe float holders, the percentage or numbers that are Camden residents and the ones that are out of town or out of state.
Okay.
Okay, talking about a lot of data here about moorings. Any other issues or questions for the harbor master?
I have one comment, if that's all right.
Yes.
Thank you. Brad Madeira, Camden resident. I don't know if it's just always the way it's been done, Steve, but in other harbors that I have operated out of, as far as wait lists go, normally, if you get on a wait list, in my experience, and then they call you and they say, okay, you're up. If you're like, no, I'm good, they're like, okay, but then you go to the back of the wait list again. And I don't know it sounds like that's not how we do it here. I just know that in lots of places where I've operated out of, that's sort of standard procedure. So it could be for another day if the committee wants to even discuss that, but I do think that's atypical for what I'm used to.
That sounds barbaric to me. But I'm willing to listen to you guys talk about it. But that sounds like someone's been on the list, they paid the money, they're waiting. And they're like, nope, I just had a baby, or I just broke my hip, I can't do it. And they've been waiting for 6 years and they lose their spot. Well, I mean, that's up to you guys, but I would fight. I would definitely stand up to say that definitely sounds unnecessary. I mean, why does it hurt us to have someone on the list? And why does it hurt someone else who's behind? So someone who's behind them is like, well, no, I think it's a great idea. But then all of a sudden it's their turn to get a mooring, but all of a sudden they have they break their arm or they can't do it. Now they're going to be like, well, wait a minute, maybe I shouldn't have said this. But anyway, that's the way we've done it. It made sense to me when I first came on board to say, yeah, that makes sense. But if the committee wants to bring that up.
It makes sense to me, but I had the first thought kind of just like, oh, somebody's been waiting for over 30 years. And yeah, I get it. But yeah.
Well, being almost elderly, I've become aware of the whole get into Quarry Hill thing, where in places like that, I'm not on the list and I refuse to get on the list, but a lot of those places say, okay, you get 3 not my styles, and then you're in trouble. But so there could be a middle ground.
That may be a mechanism that's a little beyond our staff capabilities.
Well, Brad, thank you for bringing up the topic. Any other issues for the harbor master? Good, we'll move on to dinghies. I'd like to start by identifying the specification for dinghy in our ordinance. That's 108-17B, harbor master, okay, said vessel, referring to dinghies, shall not be over 14 feet in length or have a beam over 6 feet. And shall be tied to designated floats only, 14 by 6. So that's the specification that's in our ordinance. And I've been thinking about that, and I was wondering what kind of boat has such dimensions?
13-foot whaler.
14 footer.
A 14-foot with 6-foot beam. You know, what kind of vessel would have been in mind to the writers of this?
I'm not sure whether we're referring to a single boat that's 14 by 6. We're dealing with the total length or the beam,
Well,
not,
okay, how about a
combination.
12 by 6 then, or a 10 by 6?
sure, that's okay.
What would that be?
I have no idea.
Pontoon boat.
Right.
I think that I would suggest that now is the time for us to not be tied into what was drafted previously. There is so much difference in the use of boats between not pontoons, inflatables, and kayaks and just all sorts of stuff. And that we should take a bigger picture look. And I don't know that personally, I think there ought to be multiple locations for different types of boats, and that will allow people to play well with others better. And that then you'd be defining, okay, I'm just making up, a rowboat is such and such, it will go here. A inflatable or motorized craft will be such and such and go there. And the kayaks will be such and such. And just the idea that we have one description that covers all the ways that you use small boats in the harbor is outdated.
Okay, Bob. Thank you for that. That's an idea, and I think we're going to hear more ideas. I'd like to focus on the data right now. On August 26th, we had a survey of dinghies in Camden Harbor. And thank you to all of those who participated, committee members, select board member, and members of the public also. It was a good effort, and we got a lot of data. And the cover sheet is in front of you, and it gives a breakdown of what we'll just call dinghies on at public facilities and private facilities, and a total for both of those. So Town of Camden facilities, I'm calling the float right in front of the harbor master's office is one. The launch dock was another. Inner Harbor River Falls location. I like that, Susan, the River Falls dock. Steamboat landing, and then we have three personal, what I'm calling personal vessel racks around town. That was a total of, I believe, 9 locations. Well, and then we have our private facilities, Yacht Club and Lyman Morse. Public facilities, we had 163 total vessels counted.
So that included ones that are up on dry land, not
Yep.
just.
On the racks,
Okay.
on the racks, everything. Look at the sheet there. The other sheet. Yeah. So we've been told that there are, it was reported 207 permits sold by the town this year. Not all of these vessels that were counted, including in this data, had permit stickers. The permit stickers at the racks for the kayaks, et cetera, it was very difficult to identify those. People put the stickers in different places, and then it was hard to identify whether they had permits or not. But I think it's safe to assume that not every dinghy that was counted had a permit. And nevertheless, we had 163 counted and 207 permits issued. So there's, 44 vessels not counted that were permitted. Where do we think those vessels are?
Well, I don't know where those vessels are, but August 26th, some of the summer people were probably taking kids back to school and pulling out by then. But I do have a question, and I know you did the count on the Harbor Master's float, the launch dock. There's a transient section. Was this count of all dinghies that were there?
I think it's broken up in the survey, because we did note the transient zone, permit zone, transient zone.
Ron?
We didn't count the dinghies that were on moorings.
Yeah.
Yes, that's correct. But I'm trying to answer Stephen's question first
Yeah.
before we move on.
Was where were those 44 dinghies that had permits?
Yes,
that didn't
okay.
show up?
I get that.
So
Some
of
dinghies
them
were
may-
on boats.
Some of them were on boat
Mhm.
moorings.
Yes,
And some were out cruising behind boats.
on boats. Yep. Okay, sure.
Just
That-
to
that-
answer your question. So,
Yeah, that,
You might also have kayaks that don't live there
Well, not necessarily.
and are left there, but not
Just
necessarily.
didn't have
left there also.
stickers?
No, so this 1, 2, 3,
yeah,
4 of them
okay.
had town stickers.
All right.
My rowboat, the one with
So there were
seatbelt landing
Camden
was out
boats.
in the morning.
So is that kind of,
Right. Getting to Stephen's question about transients here, or the transient zone on the launch dock. And here's the data on that. What was in the transient zone and what wasn't.
so there were 8 boats in the transient zone.
Right,
zone.
and
Well, are they in that count of 13 plus 6? No, not the harbor, launch dock rather. 7 and 11. Are the transient boats counted in that 18?
yes,
Yeah,
Calling them.
yeah.
yes, they were, but they weren't all transients.
Most of them were Camden stickers.
Of the 8 boats that were in the transient zone, 4 of them were permitted.
Oh, yeah.
I'd be interested in, this is just observational, but one, I think it's very hard, since our permits don't describe the subclass of boats like I was describing, so we don't really know how many of those were kayaks versus rowboats versus motorized. But I'm concerned with the capacity, and was the sense that on that morning, there were not many open spaces, or if you brought your permitted boat in, would you have had no problem finding a space? And that's just anecdotal, but
Okay, that's a good question. On the launch dock, for example, we had 18 boats on 76 feet. 26 feet in the transient zone, 50 feet in the permit zone, 76 feet of dock. We had 18 boats. What is the, divide 76 by 18? 4
almost
point,
4.
it's over 4.
Oh. Okay,
4.3.
Well, there wasn't room. There was 2 huge
Okay.
whalers sticking out.
And,
what are we calling the launch dock? Where's that?
That's one that's 86 feet long and the dinghies are on one side. We do overnight dockets to the other, right in front of the harbor master office, the big one.
But it's not the one that's on the wall, it's the next one.
No, it's the
The
next
next
one.
Now, for the launch dock specifically, I don't have this information, but oh no, yeah, I do. On the launch dock, we had both, what I'm referring to as fixed hull, rowboats, dories, whatever they are, as opposed to inflatables. The average length on the fixed hull was 13 foot. The average beam was 58 inches. And inflatables, average length was 10 foot and 60-inch beam. So you've got approximately 60-inch beam on all those boats, those 18 boats, 5 foot. 5 foot times 18 is 90, isn't it? Yes. 5 times 18 is 90 and 76 foot of dock. So is that kind of getting to what
Yes.
you're asking about? Yes.
Elliot, I don't know if you collected the data, but just anecdotally, on the dinghies that are at the yacht club and Lyman Morse, did many of them have stickers?
We didn't check for stickers, but none were observed.
Okay.
You know, sometimes it's easy to see
Yep.
a sticker, but we weren't checking for stickers on private
Just
facilities. Getting to, let's see here, River Falls. We had 50 dinghy vessels and 4 personal vessels. So we had 54 vessels. And we had 276 feet, is that right? Yes, 276 feet of what's called available frontage. Now that measurement of that dock rail includes inside corners. In inside corners, you don't accommodate dinghies on every foot.
Oh, well.
Not well. We all know how bad those inside corners can be. So 276 by 54 is 5.1 feet. Right, you had calculated that. 5 feet. So that's dinghies packed in there using the 60-inch as a standard beam.
Elliot, what are you
They're
calling
tight.
personal vessels?
Kayak, canoe,
Oh,
stand-up paddleboard. Okay, so getting back to the cover sheet, 163 dinghies counted on public facilities. We had 72 counted at Yacht Club and Lyman Morse. So approximately 70% of our dinghies in the harbor are on public facilities and 30% on private. 235 total units counted. And as Ron cited an example, dinghies out on boats. Yeah, there were undoubtedly dinghies tied up on boats or out with boats. But 44? I don't know. But anyway,
No.
those are,
but the kind of numbers of boats we saw out on the bay.
Yeah, but again, because we don't have, with the permits, we don't know what kind of critters got a permit. So it wouldn't surprise me at all if there are a lot of kayak permits that could be being used in the lake, or someone doesn't want to leave it down there for 2 weeks while they're not using it. So, to assume that all of the, whatever the math says the number is, are all boats that would stay in salt water for the season and be used to access things on the mooring or to access the harbor. I think we don't have the data to really know what percentage of those.
and at the 3 racks, Steamboat Landing, Lake Beach, and Marine Avenue, Steamboat had 18, and Lake Beach had 27, and Marine Avenue, it only had 3. Marine Avenue is, it's a little further out of town. It's, the parking is difficult, parking and difficult, turnaround are difficult at Marine Avenue. But there's a nice big rack out there, but it only had three kayaks on it. But Lake Beach, lot of vessels out there, steamboat landing, a lot there.
Well, Elliot, that's basically saying 48 vessels, kayaks, that should have permits are not relevant to the in-water space because they're on racks, or should be. Well, those are on racks.
Yes.
So of 207 permits, maybe 160 of them or something like that are,
Good point.
have the space problem.
Good point. And if you don't mind me interjecting, as of right now, the ordinance doesn't state that, you just get a permit. So all those kayakers could plop their boats in tomorrow in the water, and because there's no ordinance that says you can't. So that's great, but until we really manipulate and change that ordinance, I wouldn't put that in the equation just yet. And one more thing while we're on it, Mr. Chairperson, I noticed that it takes the community, and this is any community, but for this one, you put a rack in outside, and there's years where no one, what's that? I'm not putting my boat there. And then after a while, it fills up. That's why the Marine Ave, maybe that's why people around there are like.
How long has that been there?
The Marine Ave, 3 years?
Oh, okay.
I would
Not-
think Marine Ave would present problems of, great, you can leave your kayak there, but where do you leave your car and how do you get back to your kayak? And
And what do you do at low tide?
Yeah,
It's
you
pretty
drag
muddy,
them.
right?
No, it's not
Rocks,
muddy, it's
rocky
rocks. Soft, kind of
beach,
soft
yeah.
rocks. But it's funny because I've heard people come physically tell me at the supermarket, thanks for putting that rack in at Marine Ave. I love it. It's right next to my house.
Right, so some people love it.
Some
but I
people
mean,
like it.
yeah.
It's good for some
What
people.
about the Marine Ave?
There's a couple boats out there.
Well, yeah.
I think that the
I mean, we had one
steamboat
guy.
landing rack started out as a place where people thought they were gonna put very small light rowboats. And somewhere along the way, people caught up to the idea that kayaks don't have to be on car roofs. And then, as Steve said, suddenly in the last, I don't know, I would say last 5 years, I got a honest relative, there's hardly a space open, but they are not with light, tired out rowboats, they're kayaks.
Yeah. No, when I was there counting, there were 2 on the ground. The rack was full.
We had somebody ask us when we were at Lake Beach, he doesn't even want to bring his kayak up the hill. He wanted to see if he could get a winter permit, so he never has to bring it up. So there's all types.
Yeah. Well. Okay, so that's the numbers. Does anybody have any questions about those? Susan?
Yeah, I'm loving this process. I think it's so valuable. And now I think the question is, what is the question?
I think,
So is it a question of capacity determining, and as another part of this, we talked about upgrading the data that the town is able to access, because this is all entered on paper. There isn't a database, so there's that opportunity as well to be making it easier to access the information. But then it comes down to a question of capacity. What's the question that we're actually asking now? We've got this information. Do we have enough capacity for this many boats? Do we need to add capacity? Do we need to tweak the ordinance? But, I think it'll be interesting to kind of get our teeth into what we do now going forward.
Ron?
I appreciate the effort that everyone's put into.
Are you
accumulating this.
answering Susan? Are you going to address Susan's question?
Yeah,
Okay, all right. Thank you, thank you. Go ahead.
I was just thanking you for collecting the information.
Yeah.
It's valuable and it's interesting to look at. But ultimately, I come back to where I was a month ago, which was my opinion that the facility is overcrowded. And that's still a subjective opinion. I'm sorry, but it is, regardless of what we have on paper. It's just my opinion that it's overcrowded and maybe undermanaged. So I haven't arrived at any other, my conclusions haven't changed as a result of this information, I guess is all I can say. And all any of us can hope to do, is come up with an opinion regarding, is it too crowded or is it okay?
Bob,
Maybe I just go back to my original thought. Yes, I think probably all locations are at least somewhat overcrowded. I also think that we need to start realizing that there are multiple categories here and that we need, if I was just drawing it up, next year there would be a kayak permit and some other permit, and maybe there'd be 2 other permits. But the bottom line is this data was incredibly helpful and to have numbers, but it's because we don't know how many of those permits were this or that, there's only so much we can do right now, but we do know it's overcrowded now. So I think we need to solve that. And part of that is having similar boats parked in similar places so that you, for example, every place is going to have some sort of oddball thing, but you see the motor's up and someone's right next to it with the thing going like this, that's not a good idea. So I think we could manage the resource better and probably handle this capacity a little more effectively. But the other question is, we're not going to have less demand. So are there ways to create more storage space? And people have talked about a steamboat landing, you go out and you could have an L or something, an extension on it, or I don't know what the solution is, but we are going to need more capacity over the next 5, 10, 20 years.
So that's 5 questions right there.
Good. They all need to be answered.
I'm glad you're counting, Susan. And Stephen, yes.
Just off the top of my head in that, in terms of areas to look at, size issues, okay? Changing the regulation about maybe width and length, classification, kayaks. Kayaks already get a deal. I think their permits are only $75 compared to $125. Space is obviously a big issue that we're talking about. And the other is regulations. And these regulations can include a kayak permit cannot be on a dock. We might think about separating, this goes back to one of Ron's concerns. I know there are some towns that say this area is restricted to hard boats and this area is restricted to inflatables to try and solve some of the problems. So, we're going to have to attack this area by area.
Okay, well, I think we're going to address solutions and suggestions.
At a future date.
Well, we're going to get to that.
Yeah.
But Susan, you asked, what is the question?
Yeah.
Have you got feedback on that?
Well, I've got a running list going here. I think this is a really interesting project for this group to tackle, and it's going to take a number of discussions, and I think it's great that we started off with this data, and then we can, one of the pieces was with the new software. I don't know whether, I spoke with Audra and Jimmy about getting this information put into a database, because now it's just on paper. So is that going to be something that this committee could help with? participate in? Are there fields on the application that we might want to add? Are there, more data that can be collected? So it's multi-pronged for sure.
Okay, so, and I'd like to offer my personal response
Yeah.
to your question. Overcrowding.
Yeah.
From a user standpoint,
Yeah.
not finding the spot can be difficult. And what's that whaler doing here?
Right, I think the anecdotal evidence too, that we were, the day that you and I were just down there on the dock and chatting with people, that was the consistent response from voters, for sure.
That's Bob.
I have a question for Steve. You said that the kayak pay less. Is that for something up at the lake, or literally the kayak racks charge less for the harbor? Because if we could break that down, that would make this.
No, they
how
do
many
pay
peop-
less
how
for the
many-
harbor. The ones at the lake, they don't need a permit as far as I know. And the racks that are at the lake or anywhere, the bog, they're private. I mean, the guy rents them.
Right. So I'm thinking that we actually could have better data than we're showing here of the 200 and something total. That could be broken down as what are kayak and what are the others. And that would be meaningful, because I think the number of kayaks sitting in salt water are, if there's any.
Well,
Very few.
My
Very
first
few.
instinct would be that we have a kayak permit and we have a dinghy permit.
Yeah, but we may find that our current statistics can provide more detail than we've got on this, because if we find out how many of the permits are for quotes, what we think saltwater dinghies, then that's a very meaningful number compared to what we saw in the water that day. We may find that actually the amount that you observed are pretty close to the amount of permits.
Yeah,
Instead of thinking, well, what happened to the 45 that aren't accounted
they're
for?
in the racks, whatever, yeah.
Okay.
Could I just add to that? I think,
We've been talking about fees here. I'm looking at 2024 harbor fee list. For dinghies, there is no kayak classification. There is a no motor or electric motor. No motor / electric motor, $75.
right, which was an eco attempt by previous select board and current select board members, which I think is bogus, because if you're taking up 4 or 5 feet of the dock space, I don't care whether you have nothing on the stern or an electric motor on the stern.
Okay,
They
well,
were asking a
that's a
different
separate topic, I think,
Yeah,
Stephen.
well-
Thank you for sharing your comment, though. Getting back to the harbor fees, $75 for no motor. So if you have a rowboat, no motor, $75. If you have a kayak or canoe, doesn't have a motor on it, $75. At this time, we don't have a kayak fee.
So it's not there's not that distinction.
No.
No, we don't have that distinction. And, I think it'd be important for us to talk about that and see
Yeah.
if we can't have a system that's a little more discreet.
Mr. Chairperson, I want to add that when we made the kayak, when we made the racks, we decided that a small boat, whether it's a kayak or not, with no engine, that's light enough for someone to pull up, can put a small boat in the rack. So I think that's why we didn't delineate the two, but it might be time to do that, have a separate kayak permit.
Mhm. Okay. We can come back to the data, of course, anytime we want. It's here, it exists now. So I'd like to present the question, what is a dinghy?
Good question.
We have a definition in our ordinance, 14 foot by 5 foot, 6 foot, 14 by 6. But what is a dinghy? And Liz, yes.
Well, I just, if we're not, so say we change the ordinance to change our definition of a dinghy. I think, personally, I think it comes down to figuring out where, we have to decide if those whalers, that we're talking about, if we want to boot them out of the dinghy dock, I guess is kind of what it comes down to. But, or if they fit the description of a dinghy, I think it seems like there's quite a few people who favor the thought of have a little more organization, whether it's, I don't know. But we do have some dinghies that are over their total vessel length, right?
We have some vessels that are
Okay.
over the dinghy
Okay.
specified length, yes.
So I think that's kind of, if they fit the dinghy description, they wouldn't be a whaler with a motor, because clearly those go over the limit. So that's, to me, it's not the definition, it's an enforcement of what's a dinghy.
So I'm curious, because I don't
Just a thought.
see distance with a calculator in mind, but there's
Me
been
either.
a rowboat over at Steamboat Landing that just looks really long. There's one. Would that still be under 14 feet?
There were a couple pretty long ones where we,
We don't have
And
lengths.
I'm frankly more concerned with the 6 feet width for a dinghy seems pretty wide. But I've never measured my rowboat, I've never measured, it looks like most of the inflatables were in the 5 foot zone.
Oh,
Yeah.
So a 6 foot wide thing presents a much bigger obstacle in maneuvering around or sliding. It's oftentimes you look, you say, there's no way I'm getting in there. And then when you do a little bit of creative juggling, you leave your painter a little bit longer, the next thing you know, hey, it worked out. But you get really wide boats, particularly wide semi-rectangular boats, and it's really hard.
All right.
sorry,
Well,
that
yeah.
doesn't answer your question, Elliot, but
Well,
It was-
that's
if
addressing.
we took the ones that are at the dinghy dock that don't fit the ordinance description, we might have looked at the dock and said, these all look like dinghies, rather than seeing those couple really big ones.
Mhm. Okay, Stephen?
Well, since the real issue here is space allocation, when you're asking the question of what is a dinghy, when we look at our docks, do we want to define things by use? When you say what is a dinghy, or just by size? Because there are certainly some people there that have boats or have had boats that aren't dinghies in the sense of they're not going out to their mooring, but they're using the side, they're using the dock and they've paid for the use of that dock. So, when you're seeking a definition, it's a question of, do you want to restrict it to people that are going out to other boats, or just anyone who fits within the size requirement?
But I think I think I would start with the idea that a dinghy was intended to be an ancillary use boat, but that doesn't mean that that people who don't have a boat on a mooring shouldn't be able to have the exact same size and all of the boat, which they use to just row around the
Yeah.
harbor or go for short little trips in an inflatable.
And there are a few out there that do that.
Yeah, and so I don't really care what an individual is using a small thing for. I just care that the small thing is
Right.
properly outlined. So
That's
that
what I'm
doesn't-
saying. So maybe we should just call it the small dinghy dock. The small vessel dock. In other words,
Mhm.
are you looking for a definition of dinghy
Let's go.
that involves use or just size?
Mr. Chairperson, I think Susan brought up some great points when saying, like, if we divide this into different things where we can actually say to ourselves, basically, as an advisory committee, you're trying to figure out how, we're not going to, Mr. Perkins said we can't change the demand of people wanting to get to the ocean. People want to have an easy access to the ocean. So basically, if we broke it down and boiled it down, that's what we're talking about. They have different types of vessels that they're using, and some of them are using for different things, to get to their boat, to go look at ducks, whatever. But the idea is we need to have an easy way for folks to get to the ocean via their vessel of choice. So one point I will say before I go any further is that I don't want to contradict you, Bob, but there is a way we can lessen the demand. And that's by having some sort of public, that's my wife I just left, Steve. You have vessels that take folks in and out, the launches. So if we had some sort of public launch system or opportunities, then you could lessen.
Right. You're not lessening the demand to get to the ocean or the boat, but you're increasing the ways that people can achieve
The
that.
ability to get to it, yeah. But as far as small vessels needing permits, personal vessels, you could lessen that by having, if the town were to actually talk about a good way to actually have another boat, my department would hire, because there's tons of young kids that have launch licenses that want to work in the summer. So we could have a system where it's like, up from this time, from these days, from this time on, we could work, we could actually have it so it's available for folks that have moorings. You pay maybe an extra fee with the mooring. I don't know how we would do that. And you could even have it so you have a voucher, so someone from the yacht club could use ours as well. I don't know. That'd be another discussion, but that's one of the things. The other one is, where can we actually make it so the facility can hold more boats? Steamboat landing, we talked about having an L at the end. Library Park, I tried putting in the old steamboat landing floats in. They were too ugly, I guess, and too high up on the beach. How can we remedy that? So now we can fit more boats. As far as the 14-foot whalers, the yacht club came up with a great idea, and they have 2 bottom chains with a series of half-inch chains going up, and it holds, I think, 8 whalers apiece, really close in. The town could do that. There's shallow water there. The whaler only draws 6 inches, so we could actually do that. And so now the folks that have their 60-foot engines and their 14-foot whalers, they still need them. Well, you're going to put them right here. They're close.
How do they get to the?
They're going to have a smaller boat to get to them, or a public launch system. But again, there's how. But I think we really should take the information that we have, which Ron said is actually really great that you guys took this on, and very valuable. And now we need to, in the next 3-4 meetings, to say, how do we fix it? What are the opportunities we have to fix it? And then how do we implement that?
Okay, thank you, Steve. Stephen, you were, asking are we wanting to define dinghy by use or size? And I asked the question, why is a dinghy to stimulate conversation, which it obviously does. Personally, I don't, use is irrelevant. It's size, personally. It's the size of the vessel. Yep, Ron?
We've got the measurements of the floats. We can determine, say, what's the average beam, or say, the 6-foot description of the dinghy, that just means it's got to be under 6 feet. They made allowance for it to be 5.5, and there are inflatables that are 5.5 and still under 14 feet. So I don't see any point in changing that. But when the parking lot's full, there's no empty spaces. If we figure out how many spaces we have and say, okay, we're going to sell that many permits, problem solved. Looking to create more place to put more dinghies, that's okay, but there's a cost benefit analysis that needs to be done there. Putting an L out on the launching ramp, yeah, okay, if you're willing to build it in such a way that it'll stand up to the easterlies that we might get early and late. So, there's challenges involved, and there are good reasons why we haven't attempted to take advantage of what we might identify as additional space or additional, but I personally don't think we are under any obligation to provide more and more kayak racks, simply because there's a demand there. If which may be the case, a lot of kayaks are just put in a space and left and not used. Same dilemma that we have with moorings not being used. It's a management issue. The harbor is just is only so big and we're only going to create so much space. Ultimately, we will have filled it up if we haven't already. That's my point.
Okay, thank you, Ron. Okay, I asked the question, what is a dinghy? And I've told Stephen that from my personal standpoint, it's about size. I'm not sensing feedback about size. Is 14 foot too short, too long? 6 foot beam, too much, too little? I mean, what do you think?
I think 14's sounds long, but I haven't measured how long a long thing actually is. But I think that there is,
This is 8, this table is 8 feet.
really,
No, is it 6?
6.
This is 6. So 2 of these,
This one's 8. And that one's 8.
yeah, these, so that's
Those are
8.
6.
Yeah, there's two different.
but
I think maybe at the
I guess the
harbor doesn't
distinction
look.
I make is in terms of use at a particular float, I think inflatables should be one place and fixed hull should be somewhere
Okay,
else.
you're talking about solutions and that's good and but
No, but I'm talking about
hearing-
that just what is a dinghy is not, in length and width. I mean, maybe, okay. As long as we understand that there's not one type of boat out there that and they all need to live together. I don't mind. And I guess I would have the question, actually, is there a difference between a 14-foot by 6-foot inflatable and a 14 by 6 fixed hull in terms of how they lie together and whether one, because a 14-foot inflatable sounds pretty big to me.
It is.
That's huge.
It is. I don't.
We didn't see
We
any of
didn't
those.
encounter
No.
anything like that.
They do exist,
The-
but
I think the other, like that Inner Harbor River Falls region, to your point about jostling for position and then keeping the painter
Yeah.
longer, it's not a 1-for-1, 1 foot of dock for 1 foot of boat, because you can have many more. They're not like parking spaces. There's not like fixed slips. So we're not measuring and saying this many boats takes up this many feet, because you can have them, with a longer painter, have your boat extending out further and then have a couple up right next to the dock. So it's really difficult to calculate how much space you need to store. I think if we measured and said, we have X amount of feet of the face of the dock, we would be really limiting the resource, because that's not the way that people tie up their boats. More boats can fit.
There's
there.
an extent to where it's
Then put-
appropriate, yes.
Yeah, then each foot of, I'm not saying this very articulately, but you know what I mean, that they're.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And Ron, I'll get to you in a second. Longer painters, my experience can actually make things worse. When you have double parking with
Oh,
long
indeed,
painters.
but
then
I'm just saying,
that
makes it difficult for us to calculate how much space we actually need, because it's gonna look like we're restricting the resource, because now if people are double parked, as you say.
All right.
What I'm saying, the longer painter, you can pull a boat in, wedged in, so that
Yeah.
you can get out.
Yeah.
And then you let it out,
Right.
and they all have the ability to go like this.
Great.
So they're not really double parked, but they couldn't park with all of them with their painters 2
Right,
feet long.
that's exactly what I was trying to say.
Well, long painters is not a solution all the time. I can tell you from experience. Ron?
We're focusing our conversation on, well, I guess what I would say is our conversation illustrates very clearly the overcrowding. So, and to take you've got an 8-foot inflatable. And the only way you can tie up your 8-foot inflatable is to extend it out behind the one that you need to crawl through to get to the dock. You've now exceeded the maximum length that's permitted at the dock. you're now 16 feet plus, depending on whether the motors are up or down.
Well, the ordinance does not describe length from the dock. That's
I
not a specification.
I understand it defines a dinghy. I understand that, but the
But
point
the
is
purpose of
that
it
the
is-
purpose of defining that length is so as not to extend any farther out into the harbor than 14 feet from the face of the dock. That's the point of the ordinance.
Stephen?
Just one thing, I want to just go on record as disagreeing with Ron's idea of limiting the number of permits, because you have 400 moorings out there. You could find yourself in a situation where you're not allowing people who have moorings to have a dinghy to get to their mooring. And the other thing is we're a community, and there are people in the community that want to boat without having a big boat in a mooring, and I don't want to see those people restricted. I think given the high cost for all of us to live in this community, that we should be as accommodating as possible to our residents.
Getting higher every day.
Okay, all right, thank you, Stephen. We're all been, or not all of us, but some have been offering ideas about changes or solutions. And let's see, a solution is limiting the number of permits.
Looking for new space.
Okay, expanding the available space.
Also,
Doesn't have to mean huge. Doesn't have to mean huge space.
sort of relating to what Steve had said and what we talked about before, that, when is the real crunch? And there's certainly 5 or 6 weeks where there's a real crunch at least. And so is there a way to temporarily create more access to those boats out there by the launch chits or public, some sort of launch access that doesn't require you to put a boat in the water and keep it there? And that might only be for the super busy part of the season, because, in June and early July, I don't know that it is that hard to get float access. That's just, I'm not saying I'm in favor of it, but that's another way to get people out to their boats.
Okay, well, that's interesting idea, using launches to relieve pressure on dinghy storage. And I have a question, and I don't know that anyone will have an answer here, but I wonder if Lyman Morris's launch service is a profit center. Does anyone have any ideas about that?
Well, I don't, it's folded into the mooring fee that you have access to the launch for as many times as you want to use it.
Okay, it's part of
So
the.
you also pay a la carte to go out.
Yes, $15 round trip, $10 one way.
But not all Lyman Morris launch users are using Lyman Morris moorings. In fact, how many moorings does Lyman Morris operate?
There's like 60, I think.
No,
Is it?
it's a little less now.
Yeah.
It's like 51.
Of our 400?
I think so. 50 or 48.
That's interesting.
Yeah, that was like that when I got
Sounds like
here.
it's a whole different topic here.
I
So
don't know
let's
what
not
the
get.
fees are. I don't know what the fees are. I know
They
that
pay
Greg was
fees, that's
driving the
all for the
launch, and
launch.
people that had moorings, who were paying for a mooring, could go back and forth.
Okay,
If Steve wanted to go to his boat
Mhm.
and he wasn't at a Lyman Morris mooring, he could pay. But it was more, the most frequent use was by mooring, people who were renting moorings to go back and forth, and it's part of the fee that they pay.
okay.
Transient moorings,
And,
mostly.
Transient moorings, yeah.
Does anyone have any perspective on the yacht club's launch service and if it is profitable?
Yes, just in the sense of it's restricted to yacht club members. It used to be that you could go and pay, but starting 1 or 2 years ago, their launch service was restricted to yacht club members.
That was the old policy or current?
No, that's the current policy.
Current policy. You can't radio for a pickup by.
I don't believe so. You could ask our yacht club member.
I can provide whatever insight, any question you might have. I won't go on and on about it, but there's a lot of pressure on that launch system, especially during the busy race weekends. And they bring in extra people and they run 2 launches during those weekends. And sometimes even when there isn't an event going on, they're running 2 launches. Just to add, there is not a surplus of young people with six-pack licenses looking for work, because the yacht club is desperately trying to find them. In fact, they'll be running an education facility this winter in order to try to get some kids interested and get them up to speed and get them a 6-pack license.
It's a smaller
It's just a
license.
launch
It's a
license, I
launch-
believe, right? I don't think you have to have a
It's-
full
Yeah.
6-pack.
Actually, yeah.
Captain's
The
license.
Okay.
launches are actually licensed for more than 6 people, so it isn't just a 6-pack. It's got to be higher than that.
Because Lyman Morris, they used to have essentially a season ticket for the launch. So that I had it this is years ago. You paid an X amount and you could use it to get back and forth all summer long. Do you know if that's available?
I don't know.
I don't think so. I didn't see that.
Okay, well, that's a subtopic for sure, launches. Other solutions, limiting the number of permits, expanding dock space, using a launch service to relieve pressure on dinghy storage
I think
capacity.
organization of different vessels. I know Don was talking to another day sailor the other day, and the recreation, I'm not sure, as a kind of coming from a day sailor after a captain is coming in from a long day of work and then they have nowhere to put their dinghy can be challenging. For multiple day sailors, not just us, but I know Jeff had to pull his up on top of another person's boat.
So they use a float at overnight.
They'll use a mooring or a town dock or a float, and then they have most of us keep them across from the harbor master with the steps down. So then it'll be out there all day. And then when they come back the sailboats have 9:15 p.m. trips, and Jeff comes in late, and ours aren't as late, but even when we come in if we have us going till 6 or 7, we've had to tie up on the day sailor dock. And so, not saying, putting on my day sailor hat, but not saying we should have a priority of us, but a working vessel,
Commercial.
a commercial vessel on the waterfront, not having a spot in the evening it's a little tricky. So kind of putting into the category, kind of motors, no motors, inflatables, commercial, those kind of things. I think sounds, to me, this looks like a puzzle that I'm not sure is that
Resident.
complicated. It's just getting out there and seeing is there a spot. I think Steve's good with his eyeballs saying, hey, can we put something here to accommodate 4 more dinghies? Like every little bit counts. Can we take one of the slips in those 2 weeks in August that are insane and have people put dinghies there? I don't know, but all of these little, I'm not as much of a data person. I'm definitely a puzzle piece person. So to me, that's kind of what it looks like.
Okay, Ron, I'll get to you in a second.
Long-winded.
Dom, have you joined us today because you have something to share?
Yeah, I just had a,
Well, please step up to the table here.
just real quick.
Identify yourself and speak into the mic.
Dominic Joya, I live in Camden. It was just a kind of a out-of-the-box idea about, there's a lot of dinghies that we all look at that never really get used. So what if we somehow promoted like a dinghy share system? Just people that only use their dinghy 4 or 5 times all summer. There's probably several people that do that. Somehow, I don't know how you would organize it or work on it. Just something to think about, though. Like, you get a certain license to share dinghies.
Okay, well, that's interesting.
It's just something different. You know, we're all thinking of more space, more space, more space. Well, what about if more people used the amount of space we had,
Yeah.
the same amount of boats?
Yeah, it's almost like having like, if you had pink dinghies or some weird color, that's the one that you're allowed to use.
Right, yeah.
My cousins come in from who own Bear Island, and they'll literally say to me, well, I mean, our mooring is right next to Seamoat Landing. The boat's right there. So I'll have my gear and I'll just take someone's boat that looks like, I'll row it to mine, bring my boat in, tie the boat back exactly how I had it. And I'm like, I didn't hear that.
But just a different, you know, something different.
All right, thank you, Tom. Ron, yes.
It's a very good suggestion and well taken. It's not uncommon in Europe where they have communal bicycles. We can have, paint them a certain color or whatever, and yeah, they're available for anyone to use. Just bring it back in the same condition you found it. I don't know how you're going to keep oars in it. There won't be any boats, but I mean, there won't be any motors on them, but you know, it's a very good suggestion.
Yeah, okay.
And just to shed some light on the perspective from the management perspective, you were at the yacht club, so you can see that it's not overcrowded. And the reason for that is that they've decided this is the maximum number of boats that will fit in the spaces that we have. And they have numbers on them. Your space is allocated to you. When you become a member, you put your name on a list for a dinghy space. And within 3 or 4 years, you probably have one. And they have a very limited space for boats, and they're all limited to 10 feet. Nothing more than 10 feet, either on the dock or tied to it.
But there were
There's-
those.
There's only,
Right?
there's only 6 spaces available for boats that are more than 10 feet long. And surprisingly, the waiting list for that is not long. But take into consideration that probably less than 50% of the yacht club membership even have boats. So that diminishes the demand considerably.
But they almost doubled their space they have those racks on the dock that I had never, right? That they put dinghies in.
There's a dock
There
rack
was
there.
the racks, yeah, that held
Yeah.
fixed hulls. Not as many kayaks, I don't think.
And that's a different list.
Oh, okay.
If you want your dinghy on the dock, then you put your name on the dock list. If you want to have it be a floating space, then you put it on the floating space list.
But all of those people have the alternative of coming and getting a town permit. Whereas if you limit town permits, what's your alternative? Join the yacht club or pay Lyman Morris?
Well, anyone in town has the opportunity to join the yacht club.
And the fees are?
The current annual fee is around $1,500, which is considerably less than a golf course.
Yeah, but
Well,
considerably
not
Considerably
more
everybody,
than a
it's still
dinghy
not
permit.
accessible, yeah. That's for everybody.
Well, we did the numbers. We have a guaranteed space to park. I mean, I shouldn't, I'm trying to promote the yacht club here. It's just if you're looking for examples of alternate management strategies, you have one here.
And I think that the example leads to one of the reasons why your limited dock space probably works and doesn't offend people is that as part of your membership, you have access to that launch. So a considerable amount of, you don't have to pump out the
Reliable.
launch.
It's,
You do
it's,
it much real
you can do the math pretty fast, and by the time you've added up free parking, always having a parking space, because they stack vehicles behind each other, which you can't do any place that isn't managed. So you leave your key in your vehicle. If your vehicle is blocking somebody in, it happens at lunchtime. The dock person is at liberty to move your vehicle.
No
I'm
matter,
not talking
yeah.
about whether the yacht club's a good deal. All I'm saying is that in terms of people who are in there and then looking to leave their rowboat, it's a different equation than it is the general public in town, because your membership gets you on that launch. So if we had the availability, at least in peak seasons, for there to be a town launch, you might have less people fighting to get their dinghy permit.
So you buy a launch permit.
Okay, I'd like to ask Brad if you have anything you'd like to share with the committee.
The only other thing to answer your question.
Speak in and identify.
Yep, Brad Madeira, Camden resident. The only other thing, Elliot, I think to answer your question as maybe just a proposal, you were asking what is a dinghy? It seems like you could potentially define it by obviously length and width. Space seems to be the issue. This is a space management issue. What makes it easy when you come into the dock and not have to spend 15 minutes trying to figure out a place to park is if there's a space there. So it really seems to be a space issue. And so as a proposal, I would say you might want to consider defining a dinghy as far as who can get the dinghy permit as a vessel that's not designed to be carried. And that is under, 14 feet overall length with the engine down and maybe 62 inches of width. Something like that. 60 seems to be the average for most of the dinghies out there. You probably want to cushion that a little bit so you don't all of a sudden accidentally isolate a huge number. But that would be what seems like maybe a definition.
So are you suggesting shrinking the beam?
I think what I heard here, and I think I agree with, if it's a 6 foot wide dinghy, that's a pretty big dinghy. And usually if it's a 6 foot wide dinghy, it's probably already over, it's probably already over 14 feet, especially with an engine. So yes, I guess. I think you would still capture like a 98% of your population if you made it, or maybe not 98, but a large majority if you made it just over 5 feet, 5.5 feet.
The largest beam that was measured was 66 inches, and that was on one inflatable and another whaler.
The only other comment I would say is that, and all of us I'm sure have experienced this, but when you come in and you do have to tie up, like walking through another dinghy, it's just not that practical. If you have bags and then you have to walk through a dinghy that hasn't been pumped out, it just isn't that practical. So I do think getting your bow kind of right to the float, it makes it much more practical to use and get it in and out of your dinghy, especially if you have anything, which commonly people do. That's all I have to add at the moment.
Okay, thank you, Brad. Ron?
Since we know that there isn't a dinghy down there that's more than, 62 inches wide, the 6 foot limit is not an issue. We're not experiencing overcrowding because we have a whole lot of boats that are 6 feet wide. So talking about the beam of a dinghy, so will come into play if we try to decide how much dinghy space do we actually have. At that point, we might want to talk about reducing the beam of the description so as to allow for more boats to have access. But at this point, we know we're not, the 6 foot beam issue in terms of the definition is not an issue.
So do I hear, are you saying that shrinking the beam could be a solution?
No, he's
It would
saying
come
it's
into
not
the
a problem.
let me finish
It's
this.
not our problem.
It would come into the conversation if we were going to limit the number of dinghy spaces based on taking maximum measurement of dinghy space available and then trying to decide how many spaces will fit in that measurement. Then we might want to talk about reducing the beam. But at this point, to talk about changing the definition in the ordinance, it just doesn't make sense because, 6 feet seems wide, but it's not an issue.
I'm not sure we're ever going to get to pulling your dinghy up, having a perfect spot for it. So to me, the solution is getting a couple of these boats out of there, or I don't know. I think it would be kind of far-fetched to think we're all going to be able to pull our dinghy up, have our big spot to pull them right into. I don't know if anybody else agrees there. Not to say we should just say, let's crawl over boats, but I think trying to, I like your idea of something that's not meant to be carried, because although you do carry dinghies up and down at high tide to get them in and out, but that's definitely interesting.
Okay, I'd like to bring up a topic, prop up, prop down. How does that affect dinghy storage in Camden Harbor? Ron?
It's just good manners. So it's simple. If you think about what would you want, I guess it comes down to what do unto others as you would have others do unto you. You don't want a hole chafed in your inflatable by somebody's propeller. So don't leave your propeller up. It's just good manners.
Beyond that, it's actually destructive to other boats.
Well, that's my point. I said you would not want someone's propeller chafing a hole through your inflatable. So why would you do that to somebody else?
So I wonder if that's a little public education
It's just a
there.
no-brainer.
It's a no-brainer. It's just good
Yeah.
manners. It just goes without saying. It shouldn't even be a topic of
Problem with
discussion. Shouldn't. No.
There's a lot of them with the prop.
While we're right at it.
And don't want to extrapolate into human nature and all, but I can't imagine somebody saying, oh, I don't want to see scum on my propeller, so I'm going to leave it up and chew the crap out of this other guy's boat.
I don't think it's conscious.
No, I
No,
don't
that's-
either.
that's
That's
the
why
problem.
I'm
They
a
have to
little.
bring it up, so it is.
Well,
They
yes.
didn't bring it in that way. They put it up.
No, I just think that we should make it an actual rule. Just make it in the ordinance. In the ordinance, put it in the application, tell them that's the deal. You don't like it, don't get a dinghy permit. Start getting a little forceful on that.
I think that we can, just for a logistical problem, we can put regulations in the permit application without having to put it in the ordinance.
I agree. This
Correct.
does not all have to be in the ordinance.
I agree.
There might be
Whether
somebody new
it's,
to boating that's figuring it, like, that, we can't expect them to all be listening in on our meeting.
Go in your
Let's-
in your newsletter.
Put signs
Yeah,
up that
let's
say
figure-
all motors must be.
Or
down in
Steve,
the water.
you can put them down if, like,
Yeah, I think there could be signage.
That's just basic management.
The only reason you wouldn't do it is if you got to park somewhere where it's really low tide and you'll ground it out on rocks, that one spot.
Okay.
that's a separate issue that has solutions, but
Right.
Another possible solution would be to raise the dinghy fees.
That's a solution to
what is that
Yeah.
how does that solve the
That would
problem?
price people out of the market.
The folks that aren't using like you said, there's folks that get it and use it twice or not at all. If they got to pay more, they might say, hey, I'm just going to borrow my cousin's dinghy when I need to get out to my boat, or grab one of those pink dinghies.
Before you discourage people.
And I don't
I
like
think
doing
you'd
that.
have to raise it so much in order to discourage people from.
If you're trying to limit access by using economics, that reeks.
Not in this town. It's not going to work anyway.
Facility.
Right.
If you raise it too much, I'll try and join the yacht club.
Well, you joke,
I wouldn't join a club that would have me as a member.
but but no, you joke, but
I don't have the wardrobe for the yacht club.
that's one of the things we could put down to help the dinghy issue is encourage folks to look at what the yacht club offers and join the yacht club. As long as we don't inundate the yacht club,
They may not want that.
they may not, but we should probably,
You say they got a space problem, they got a launch problem.
To encourage people to.
You know what?
put a flyer
It's
in.
not a problem.
Not by raising fees.
The problems are solved
I would say,
by proper management.
tell them what the advantages. I didn't really notice it till Ron was saying the advantages, and seem like they're some good advantages of being in the yacht club.
So that'd be downselling Camden Harbor facilities.
if you want to think of it that way, yeah.
I think that's what it amounts to. So you can do better elsewhere.
Well, you can.
I think the reality is,
That's, I mean, it's not good if we were trying to market the facility, that would be one thing, but I think we all agree that the problem is overcrowding. So we're not trying to sell more dinghy permits in order to raise money. And I would be dead set against raising the fee to exclude the 15-year-old that wants to have a dinghy so he can go mackerel fishing. I mean, we got to think about what our priorities are here. We're trying to provide access to the harbor and to the bay for as many people as possible. But we have limitations.
right, and I think that's what we have to face, is that we can try to expand, find a few more corners to put folks in and try to manage it better so that the number doesn't damage each other, et cetera. But the reality is, it's like moorings. The harbor's only so big, there's only so many mooring spots, and that's why we have a waiting list. And the reality is, we should figure out what is the capacity for kayaks, what is the capacity for boats to stay in the salt water, and that there needs to be a limit for that and a waiting list for that. Because you can't just say, well, let's just beat each other up in our spots and keep adding more and think it's going to work out.
And to that point, and I have to leave to be in Rockland shortly, but I think your point is a really good one, and then we get to what's the definition of overcrowding, because we've got, and I'm not a mathematician to that extent, but if you have this amount of capacity and you have this amount of demand, what is the actual appropriate amount of use, and then when do we reach overuse? And does it mean that people have got their inflatables on lawn painters and have to climb over to get to the, climbing through a wet boat? Or is there no place to pull up? I think that's a really very sort of squishy kind of definition, because it's not a one-to-one ratio from this many feet of dock frontage to this many feet of boat use. So, I think we're getting close, but I don't know that we really know, how much is too much.
You're not limiting, to try to come up with a strategy to see how many dinghies will fit on your dock. That's not part of the dinghy definition. You're going to take an average of beam, and you probably provide space for that average of beam in whatever length you have.
That is a strategy.
Well, there has to be some strategy. We've got to come up with something. So it's either, well, maybe it's not average. Maybe it's, because kayaks are going to drive down the average beam. Inflatables are going to drive it up. So maybe it's okay. Maybe it does turn out to be an average. I mean, just take the width of the beam of a Dyer dinghy. I mean, their beam is based on what's comfortable to row.
Right.
If the oarlocks are any closer together than that,
You can't row.
it's not going to row well.
Right.
They don't need the oarlocks. Likewise, if they're out here, the boat's not going to row well. There's a beam that's suitable for rowboats.
I have a question. I've certainly seen,
Bye, Susan.
I don't know if it's just the number they do, but if you have a float that has only inflatables tied up to it, do they actually, because I would say that for the most part, if you have only inflatables tied up, there are a couple of weird shaped ones that get in there, but mostly they lie. And with inflatables, which I see mostly at Steamboat Landing, they're all over the place. If you have just inflatables, do they also lie parallel with each other, or do they get all twisted around again?
They lie parallel if you have enough dock space.
Well, it depends on how to tie it.
Right.
Just sometimes you see the inflatables that for some reason have come in and now the side is parallel with the float. And that's what it's like, oh my God, how am I going to get these things moved around? And I don't.
If you have a staff of several people to help you, you know.
Well, that gets to another solution, and which is a broad topic, and that is dock management. And we've been touching on some of those, some dock management issues, but I wonder if we could just kind of recap what we see as being dock management approaches.
I would say inflatables and fixed hulls go to different playpens.
Segregated types.
And then the second thing I would say, from having been in both places, that I'm being self-interest here, but human-powered vessels probably want to be at the steamboat landing. And if you have a motor that you're using to get out, you can be in the inner harbor without any great issue. So there would be, those are the two crude management, allocations I would suggest.
Okay.
The other allocation of space is that in, the falls area, unless and until some additional dredging is done, that human-powered vehicles should be restricted to that really shallow area that a motorized vessel can't get out of. And dinghies do not row or paddle very well, inflatable dinghies.
Yeah, that's right. I know. Okay. All right. So we segregate types by location.
We have to consider what type of rowboat you have. Is it a really nice rowboat, or is it a banged up, cracked, old dire dinghy that you bought on Marketplace for $50 or $25? And you park it down there because if you put anything any more valuable than that down there, it's going to get destroyed in a season anyway. So, the steamboat landing may be convenient because it shortens your row, but you can't leave any rowboat of any real value or aesthetic quality there because it'll get destroyed. Even if there were no other boats tied up there, you'd still have a hard time keeping fenders between your boat and the dock on a lot of days in the summer.
So where would the fancy rowboat go?
I don't know. I mean, in Rockport, they've got an elegant solution where they have the space between the face of the stone dock and the ramps that go down to the floats, and they've got their with weights and haul-offs. Yeah, I mean, it's elegant, and I'm sure the waiting list for that, I'm sure, is long and slow moving.
What do you suppose the lineal footage is of that dock?
Lineal footage of,
Rockport's elegance.
well, that's not it's not the point. It's the point I'm making is the question was, where would you put the elegant rowboats? All I'm pointing out to you is that Rockport has a place to put good quality rowboats. That's where they won't get destroyed. That's my only point. I don't know how long their dock is. The distance from the stone face to the floats is 25 feet maybe.
And they are moored so that bow is here, stern is there to keep them.
Either way, but
I think so.
they've got you take the weighted line and tie it to your painter when you leave. You come back, I mean, not to your painter, but to the line that's or tie it to the float. When you come back in, you tie one end of your boat up, it doesn't matter. One end of the boat gets tied to the float, the other end gets tied to the weight.
I think that's great if we had that space.
Yeah,
though
we don't-
Obviously, the space is the problem.
We
So
don't
to
have that.
The
take-
solution for us for that boat would be a trailer.
Well,
Dock-
I think those are fine. These are sort of finer lines, and you're trying to find some protected space where a boat like that could go. And honestly, now it almost starts to feel like that's not really the sort of communal tie-up thing we're talking about. It's almost like a finger float without the finger float.
Right.
I'm only pointing out the Rockport situation to illustrate that there is a demand for that, for space for that type of boat.
Yeah.
That's the only point I'm trying to make.
Elliot,
Yes, Brad.
I have a quick question. It's really for Steve. Again, Brad Madeira, Camden resident. I know the area, what we're calling the Falls area, and it's been mentioned that it's pretty shallow. And I know that, you know, you have to be careful if you have an outboard to not hit something as you're going, if it's within a foot and a half at least of low tide. Is that area ever dredged? Has been?
So the last time we dredged was approximately 10 years ago, and I told the permitter, is there a way we could dredge just a little further up in that exact area? And they were very hesitant to say yes because of the outflow of the river
Right.
and because of the, you know, ecology. Now, the interesting thing about that question is that the town has voted to get rid of the dams, which will completely change the flow of the river, which may give us an opportunity to then go to our, I mean, I believe Jeremy and I are going to permit the next dredge, 2 years from now. And so we could start figuring out if that's a possibility. Because even if we just take 10 feet out, we will make it so there's a lot more use. And that should be part of our discussion for a 3-4 year solution. Because if we can dredge that area up in the front there and then use the aggregate, whatever, to help, because again, I don't know in my head what the town has in plan, what they have planned for this next rebuild or change, which is going to happen in the next, I would imagine, 4 or 5 years. So it'd be great if we could piggyback on that and say, well, good, we want to use this area for dinghy storage now that it's going to be slightly deeper water.
Thank you.
If in fact it is, I don't know.
Steve, does the DEP get involved in that?
The DEP will definitely get involved with that. We're going to have a series
Okay,
of
okay.
different things for
It's-
sure.
It's more than just Proc Marine. It's-
Well, yeah, no, we have Army Corps, DEP, state. Remember last time we did it, we actually had instead of going to the DG drop buoy, we were able to use it and put the all of the dredge spoils up at Oak Hill Cemetery. And it actually worked out really well because now we have a whole other area for plots. And it was cheaper. So
Thank you, Steve. Okay, we're going to wrap this up here shortly. Anybody have any solutions that come to mind that we haven't talked about already? Okay, I'm going to recap these, and we'll be visiting these again. Limiting the number of permits, expanding dock footage, launch service, organize dinghies by type and location, prop up and down, have a rule, prop down. Seasonal management, Bob touched on that. A dinghy share system, interesting concept. Yacht club management strategies, and I would like to understand that a little more. I have a view of that after visiting there. Dinghy definition and dimensions. Raise the fees. I don't know if we've talked about this one. Enforcement of the regulations. Encourage users to go elsewhere. Dock management.
Be like Belfast.
Yeah.
And here's what we haven't talked about, signage. Perhaps we could have signage to remind people about keeping their props down and so on and so forth. And then we just touched on dredging to create additional draft down by the River Falls area there. So we'll look at all of these again and talk about them more. And perhaps there will be other solutions that people will have ideas about. On our agenda, the last item is Harbor Waterways Ordinance Review and consider revisions. And that is, we've touched on this, of course, and that's a huge project in looking at the whole ordinance and thinking about rewriting it. And I don't think that this committee has the will to take on that task. I do think that there are areas of the ordinance that are worth looking at closely and talking about. And one of those is definitions. I think it would be worthwhile for each of the committee members to review the definitions section of the ordinance and consider what might not be shown there. What's not listed as a meaningful and useful definition for harbor and waterways. And also to consider what specific areas of the ordinance each of us thinks is worth talking about. So I encourage you to do that in preparation for the next meeting. Does anyone have anything else they'd like to share? Liz?
I think it was in the Villager, you guys may have seen it, but I think the Coast Guard is putting a pause or revision on the buoy removal. May have seen that. I think it was yesterday or the day. So just maybe our efforts weren't unnoticed.
Where did you see that?
I think it's was it in the
I
Villager?
would say it was like a week ago.
I saw that too.
They announced, yeah.
You're on
Putting it in
pause.
abeyance and listening to more input.
So anyway, that's,
I read a story in the New York Times that isn't quite consistent with that viewpoint. And in fact, a representative of the Coast Guard spoke with disregard for the buoys. And I thought that was interesting, and I have a link to that article, and I'll send that to the committee members, and if you're interested, you can take a look at it. But
well, hopefully ours was. more
yeah,
accurate.
yours sounds
Yeah.
sounds better than the one that I read.
Yeah, I'm not sure which came from where, but
Wording was they're putting a pause on it.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, to read.
Public outcry.
yeah,
I
right.
think they were going to revise, maybe they're,
Yeah, okay.
Harbor squawked the loudest.
They didn't say they're getting rid of the idea, they said they're putting a pause on it.
Okay, very
I thought
good.
still positive, but yeah, not,
It was
yeah.
very positive about that.
All right, well, thank you all for your participation today. Meeting is adjourned.
Steve, tomorrow night. I was like, Henry said he was eating a sandwich, I heard that.
He's in. Yeah, for some reason.
Did he
was
get
He was upset. It wasn't me, it was Sid goes, he's eating a donut.
No.
Maybe he got caught, maybe he's trying to deny he's eating a donut. Why, is he have a donut problem?
No,
No?
no, he doesn't have a problem with being cheese too.
Oh. I'm like, hanging out. He knows where I live.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah, on buoys, I still think the truck should take.
Yes. They've got a boot.